Satan, also known as the Devil, is the main antagonist of the 2004 religious splatter horror drama film The Passion of the Christ, which recounts the final days of Jesus Christ prior to his crucifixion as recorded in the Bible. He is represented as a corrupting force embodied as a genderless, pale humanoid figure. Before we talk about the chilling portrayal of Satan in The Passion of the Christ, let's meet the woman behind the role. And trust me, what you're about to discover about this performance, the symbolism and the actress behind it will change the way you see evil on screen forever. Rosalinda Celentano, born in Rome in 1968, is the daughter of two Italian legends, singer Adriano Celentano and actress Claudia Mori. But Rosalinda chose her own path marked by boldness and depth. She began as a singer, performing at the iconic Sanremo Festival in the early 90s. And releasing an album that earned critical attention. Yet it was her shift into acting that revealed a darker, more enigmatic side of her talent. Over the years, she took on intense, often unconventional roles, culminating in her unforgettable appearance as Satan in Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ. With a shaved head, androgynous features, and a haunting presence, she embodied evil in a way no one expected. A performance that was symbolic, unsettling, and deeply memorable. Outside of acting, Rosalinda is also a painter, sculptor, and stage performer. She's spoken openly about her struggles with depression and identity, using art as a form of healing. Her life and work defy categories, just like her portrayal of Satan, which still sparks conversation decades later. To truly understand the depth of this story, we must first understand who Satan is and where he came from. Satan was once an angel named Lucifer who served God. At some point, Lucifer rebelled against God and was banished from heaven, along with other angels who chose to serve him. Lucifer became Satan and a demon, along with the other banished angels. Satan also became the ruler of hell. In the late hours of night, Satan appears to Jesus Christ praying in the forested Garden of Gethsemane. He tries to deceive Jesus by saying that no one man can bear the weight of humanity's sins. Jesus ignores him and continues to pray. However, a serpent emerges from Satan's cloak and slithers towards Jesus, who notices it in time and crushes it with his foot. Satan promptly vanishes. Later, Satan assigns his demons to influence and possess Judas, one of Jesus' disciples. While possessed, Judas betrays Jesus to the religious authorities in the Temple of Jerusalem in return for 30 pieces of silver. Judas, along with the Roman soldiers who control the area, manage to track Jesus down. Judas proudly displays his betrayal of Jesus by kissing him on the cheek. The soldiers aggressively escort Jesus out of the scene, and he is subjected to several humiliating trials in the Temple of Jerusalem before being ultimately sentenced to death. Realizing the errors of his ways, Judas tries to return the silver to the authorities, but they refuse his offer. At the same time, Satan and his demons in the form of deformed human children torment Judas for his actions. Judas decides to flee the city, but Satan and his demons catch up to him. Seeing a rope from the body of a dead donkey, Satan drives Judas to hang himself on the branch of a parched tree. Meanwhile, after the trials, Jesus is interrogated by Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor. The hostile crowd demands that Pilate crucify Jesus. Pilate reluctantly complies to their demands as Satan enters the scene to influence and corrupt Pilate's centurions. Satan expresses his utter hatred of Jesus and God's creation overall by driving the centurions to whip and scourge Jesus within an inch of his life. While Satan watches Jesus being tortured, he taunts the Messiah by holding a hideous demonic baby in front of him. Satan then encourages the centurions to force Jesus to carry the cross he is to be crucified onto Golgotha, beating him whenever he faints from exhaustion. During the long journey to the skull, Satan, with a look of sadistic pleasure, briefly watches a suffering Jesus carrying his cross. At Golgotha, Jesus is ultimately crucified on the cross after hours of torture. As he was nailed to the cross while atop Golgotha, he gives up his spirit and dies. After Jesus' passing, a droplet of rain fell from the sky and landed at the foot of the cross. At this, a great earthquake suddenly occurs, which damaged the temple in Jerusalem, and the veil that covers the Holy of Holies was ripped in two. During this scene, Satan lets out a scream of fury at his own defeat, having been imprisoned in hell, which has been transformed into an empty desert populated by skeletons. Despite his character being masculine in nature, the Passion of Christ's depiction of Satan is that of an androgynous albino human director. Mel Gibson chose lesbian Italian actress Rosalinda Celentano to play the character in order to achieve an eerily genderless appearance and to make the character more intriguing, mysterious, and frightening. Although the centurions are shown to be the main torturers who crucified Jesus Christ, Satan is implied to be the primary instigator. This is indicated when he appears at irregular moments behind the centurions torturing Jesus. The meaning behind the demonic baby was debated amongst fans. However, Gibson theorized, it's evil distorting what's good. What is more tender and beautiful than a mother and a child? So the devil takes that and distorts it just a little bit. Instead of a normal mother and child, you have an androgynous figure holding a 40-year-old baby with hair on his back. It is weird. It is shocking. It's almost too much, just like turning Jesus over to continue scourging him on his chest is shocking. And almost too much, which is the exact moment when this appearance of the devil and the baby takes place. Some critics believe that the demonic baby represents the sinful nature of humanity, which Satan nurtures. The demonic baby disappears when Satan is defeated, implying that he has lost his sinister control over humanity. Despite his malevolent nature, Satan unintentionally plays a significant role in advancing God's benevolent will. Though Satan is the film's main antagonist, he only has a short amount of screen time. This depiction of Satan has been hailed as one of the scariest on-screen portrayals of the devil. Like the depiction of the entity as a ghost-like androgynous albino human, instead of the traditional image of a red-skinned, horned, satyr-like monster hell, is depicted in this film as a desolate wasteland rather than an area of fires. This was also likely done for the same token of creating a frightening atmosphere. Satan being alone in hell could be an indication that the harrowing of hell has happened where Jesus descended into the land of the dead to bring righteous souls to hell before he was born. When Mel Gibson embarked on creating the Passion of the Christ, he envisioned Satan not as the traditional horned figure, but as an embodiment of subtle, alluring evil. He sought an androgynous presence, someone who could portray a being that was both captivating and unsettling. Enter Rosalinda Celentano, an Italian actress known for her striking features and intense performances. Gibson cast her to bring this unique vision of Satan to life. To achieve the desired effect, Gibson employed several techniques. Visual transformation. Celentano's eyebrows were shaved and her scenes were shot in slow motion to give her movements an otherworldly quality. Vocal alteration. Although Celentano provided her own voice, it was digitally modified to sound more metallic and ambiguous, blurring the lines between male and female tones. Gibson explained his choices stating, "I believe the devil is real, but I don't believe he shows up too often with horns and smoke and a forked tail. The devil is smarter than that. Evil is alluring, attractive. It looks almost normal, almost good, but not quite." This portrayal of Satan as a subtly distorted figure serves as a metaphor for how evil can appear deceptively benign, making Celentano's performance both haunting and thought-provoking. After her haunting portrayal of Satan in The Passion of the Christ, Italian actress Rosalinda Celentano shared insights into her experience in various interviews. She revealed that the voice used for Satan was indeed her own, stating, "The voice was mine. It was deep. I dubbed it myself in a heavier tone. What they did then with my voice is they altered it with a harmonizer to make the voice more metallized. It was a pretty natural process. They did it in a way that the voice could be attributed to anyone, a man, a woman, an old man, a young woman, or no one in particular. That was their intention." This approach aligned with director Mel Gibson's vision of depicting evil as alluring and ambiguous. He explained his choice by saying, "I believe the devil is real, but I don't believe he shows up too often with horns and smoke and a forked tail. The devil is smarter than that. Evil is alluring, attractive. It looks almost normal, almost good, but not quite." Celentano's performance, characterized by her androgynous appearance and the unsettling presence she brought to the role, contributed significantly to the film's intense atmosphere. Her portrayal remains one of the most memorable aspects of the movie, sparking discussions about the nature of evil and its representation in cinema. Now let's take a look at how this role impacted the life and psyche of Rosalinda Celentano. Rosalinda Celentano didn't just play a villain. She portrayed Satan, the very symbol of deception, corruption, and darkness in one of the most spiritually intense films of our time. And she did it in a way that was so quiet, so unnervingly calm, it made the role even more disturbing. But behind the camera, behind the makeup and special effects, one question lingers. What was the emotional and psychological toll of becoming that figure? Though Celentano has rarely spoken in depth about her inner experience on set, we can only imagine the emotional weight she carried. She shaved her eyebrows. She moved in slow motion. Her voice was digitally distorted. Her very identity was stripped down and reshaped to serve a purpose that was chilling by design. For weeks, she lived in the skin of a character who exists to twist truth, mock innocence, and haunt the soul. Actors often talk about how difficult it is to return to themselves after embodying deeply dark roles. And while Celentano is no stranger to complex characters, this was different. She wasn't just acting. She was becoming the tempter in the very story of Christ's suffering. That's not something you simply walk away from. In interviews, years later, she opened up about her battles with depression and personal darkness. While she never directly linked them to this role, it's hard not to draw a connection. How much of that shadow followed her off set? How deeply did she have to go to bring that kind of presence to life? And maybe more importantly, what does it say about evil when it's portrayed through stillness, beauty, and ambiguity rather than rage? Out of all the haunting moments in The Passion of the Christ, one scene stands out in a way that's both grotesque and deeply symbolic. Satan cradling a deformed infant during Christ's scourging. It's a moment that wasn't in the gospel accounts. It was a choice, an artistic and spiritual choice made by Mel Gibson to disturb, to provoke, and to reveal something deeper about the nature of evil. But what does it actually mean? In that scene, as Jesus is brutally whipped and mocked, Satan watches from the crowd moving slowly, almost serenely, and in her arms, a twisted, unnatural child smiles grotesquely. It's a mockery of Mary and the Christ child, a parody of purity, a visual lie. The baby represents the corruption of innocence, a perversion of what is meant to be beautiful and sacred, where Mary's child brings salvation. This child brings revulsion, where Mary nurtures life. Satan nurses decay. It's evil pretending to be love. Comfort that leads to death. It's the devil offering affection not to heal but to mock. Mel Gibson later explained that the image was designed to show how evil mimics what is holy, distorting it just enough to appear close, almost familiar but never true. It's that almost that makes it dangerous. Evil rarely shows up looking terrifying. It disguises itself in twisted versions of what we cherish. Love, peace, even family. The image lingers because it's more than shock value. It speaks to a terrifying truth. Satan doesn't always come to destroy with force. Sometimes he comes cradling something that looks like comfort. Until you look closer. This moment forces us to ask, what lies have we embraced that once looked like love but turned out to be something else entirely? You might expect that playing one of the most haunting portrayals of Satan in cinematic history would launch an actor into global fame. But for Rosalinda Celentano, that wasn't the path. Her performance in The Passion of the Christ was unforgettable, critically praised, artistically daring, and spiritually provocative. And yet after the film's release, Rosalinda didn't chase the spotlight. She didn't appear in blockbuster films. She didn't take on roles in Hollywood or become a household name. Instead, she quietly stepped back, continuing to act occasionally in Italian cinema, exploring smaller projects and pouring her soul into other forms of art. Painting, sculpture, and theater. For some, it felt like she vanished, but maybe that was intentional. Rosalinda has always been different, a soul drawn to expression, not fame. In interviews, she's spoken more about inner battles than career ambition. She's been open about facing depression, identity struggles, and her ongoing search for meaning beyond the screen. Perhaps playing Satan a role so emotionally dark and spiritually charged was less a career move and more a deeply personal, transformative experience. Some roles change your trajectory, others change you. For Rosalinda, portraying evil wasn't about building a brand, it was about surrendering to something terrifying, beautiful, and brutally honest. And when it was over, she didn't try to capitalize on it. She let the performance speak for itself and walked away. In doing so, she didn't just play Satan, she became a mystery. And in today's world where everyone craves attention, maybe that's the most radical choice of all. There are scenes in cinema that entertain, some that inspire. But The Passion of the Christ did something else it confronted. And no moment was more disturbing, more spiritually jarring than the silent gaze of Satan. When the film was released, many viewers left the theater shaken, not just by the graphic violence, but by the way evil was portrayed. Rosalinda Celentano's Satan didn't rely on jump scares or loud threats. She unnerved you in silence. She looked directly at you, through the screen, through the suffering, as if she knew something you didn't. Across forums, reviews, and interviews, people describe the same reaction: chills, discomfort, a lingering sense of unease they couldn't explain. Some said the baby scene made them feel sick. Others said they couldn't stop thinking about Satan's presence even days after watching. It wasn't just horror, it was spiritual dissonance. For many Christian viewers, this wasn't just a character, it was a mirror. A representation of how evil works in real life, not by shocking us, but by slowly numbing us. By blending into the background, by showing up in familiar forms. The fact that Satan looked calm, almost nurturing, only made the message clearer. Evil is rarely obvious. And that's why it's so dangerous. Some pastors even use this scene in sermons to illustrate how temptation doesn't always scream, it whispers. It mimics truth. It offers comfort at the cost of conviction. And perhaps that's why Rosalinda's performance still echoes today. It wasn't just a role. It was a theological statement, a visual parable about how darkness hides in plain sight. The question is, did we recognize it when we saw it? I still remember the first time I watched The Passion of the Christ. I expected the violence. I expected the sorrow. I even prepared myself for the crucifixion. But what I didn't expect, what I wasn't ready for, was her. Satan didn't appear with thunder or flames. She simply walked into the scene, slow, silent eyes locked on Christ. And in that moment, everything in me paused. I wasn't just watching a character. I was feeling something shift in the atmosphere. Cold, hollow, familiar, in a way that made me uncomfortable. And then, the baby, that twisted smile, that unnatural calm. It was like witnessing a nightmare that you know is telling the truth. What struck me wasn't how terrifying she looked, but how subtle it all was. There was no overacting, no screams, just presence. Controlled, calculated, watching suffering like it was entertainment. Whispering lies we all secretly hear in our own lives. Is this really worth it? There's another way. That scene didn't scare me in the traditional sense. It convicted me. It made me realize that evil doesn't always break down the door. Sometimes it just sits next to us and smiles. And even now, years later, I don't just remember what I saw, I remember what I felt. That's the power of art. That's the power of this performance. And maybe that's the most terrifying thing of all. We watched her on screen, silent, elegant, unsettling. We saw Satan move through the shadows, not with force, but with familiarity. And maybe the scariest part is how real that felt. So let me ask you something. What if this is exactly how Satan works today? What if he's not screaming at us, but whispering through compromise? What if he's not shaking the ground, but planting quiet lies in the heart? Lies that feel like comfort, like freedom, like truth. What if the real danger is not when he roars, but when we don't even notice he's there? Because Satan in The Passion of the Christ isn't just a character, he's a warning. A warning that evil doesn't always come in darkness. Sometimes it comes in beauty, in logic, in things that almost sound right but aren't. So ask yourself honestly, where in your life has something looked harmless but hollowed your spirit? Where have you felt that whisper saying, just give in, it's not that serious? And have you mistaken it for your own voice? This film, this performance, it's not just disturbing for what it shows. It's disturbing for what it reveals about us, about our blindness, our comfort, our silence. So don't just watch the movie, watch your life, because Satan may still be walking, slowly, silently, and closer than you think. Now I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Your story might help someone else see things more clearly. Let's not keep this conversation in the shadows. Let's bring it into the light together.